Am I imagining it, or does it seem that the world of hi-fi has reached peak DAC? I mean, who doesn't make one now? The list of manufacturers who sell DACs has grown exponentially in recent years. And they can be tiny and portable or large and unwieldy, priced from under $10 to sky's the limit. I'm not going to pretend that I actually know how DACs are designed and what actually is really happening inside the chips and circuits. I've learned some of the nomenclature and have a vague grasp of how they work. But any attempt to dig deeper into the theory and convoluted machinations of how digital data becomes music has so far eluded my intellectual abilities. And I honestly don't believe many self-proclaimed experts and reviewers out there really know the ins and outs and nuts and bolts of how this stuff works either. In my estimation, only a relatively small number of expert engineers can fully comprehend how these devices work. And I haven't seen many reviewers who appear to know that much more than me. You know, we read the marketing materials and other reviews in an attempt to glean a sliver of insight into digital audio. But you know, the reviewer's job is to evaluate the final product and assess their strengths, weaknesses, and value propositions. The raw DAC chips alone are usually just a few dollars each to buy in bulk. How they're implemented is where the high cost comes from. You know, circuit boards, capacitors, resistors, power supplies, and especially the case and display is where resources are spent. The magic or secret sauce is how well all the components are combined and interact. Currently, the most common and cost-effective way to build a DAC is to buy any number of off-the-shelf Delta Sigma DAC chips from companies like ESS, AKM, Texas Instruments, or Cirrus Logic, and build a component around it. The other, less common and costlier option is to design one without using a chip, but rather build an R2R ladder DAC, which from what I understand uses a relatively simple series of discrete resistors in a ladder configuration to convert the digital signals to analog. I found an interesting analogy online that equates a ladder R2R DAC to a full-sized camera with a conventional glass lens that captures the image in a straightforward manner. And a Delta Sigma DAC is compared to the tiny camera in your smartphone that employs software-based computational DSP post-processing algorithms to manipulate the pixels to get a pleasing image. A Delta Sigma DAC usually measures extremely well, but they must rely on complex oversampling, demodulation, and noise shaping to achieve best results. And all that does affect how a ladder DAC sounds compared to a Delta Sigma model. It is generally said that ladder DACs may be less linear, but produce a pleasing, deeper tone with more natural sounding presentation, whereas Delta Sigma models can sound a bit more clinical or detailed and neutral. And for over a year, my best DAC has been a Topping D70S that I've been very satisfied with regarding sound quality and features. It has a pre-factory fire AKM Delta Sigma DAC, and yes, it measures well and all that, and it's a significant sonic upgrade from the AudioQuest Dragonfly Black and Shit Modi 3 that I'd been using previously. I've compared the D70S to other less expensive Topping and SMSL DACs and found it sounded much better to my ears. That's the thing in life, isn't it? You're really happy with what you have until something you like better, and usually a lot more expensive, comes along. A few months ago, I received another DAC for review. Not the usual sub $1,000 units that I'm accustomed to, but rather a $3,100 Holo Spring 3 KTE DAC from Kitsune Audio. And as soon as I picked up the box from my front porch, I knew this was going to be something much different from anything I've encountered before. It is damn heavy for a DAC. The Holo Audio Spring 3 KTE is a full-width R2R ladder DAC that weighs in at 18 pounds. The impressive case is constructed from black anodized aluminum with stunning copper side panels. And it's clear to me that Jeff Zhu, the founder and chief engineer at Holo Audio, is one of those top expert engineers who knows all the intricacies of designing and building a top-notch digital product. Taking a closer look at the Spring 3, it feels and looks nice and solid with black aluminum casework and a simple array of copper-colored buttons on the front. You have standby power, mute, menu, and left and right arrows. The display is okay, but it's a pretty basic dot matrix monochrome affair. And it primarily displays the current sampling rate and which input is selected. Around the back we have the usual digital inputs, USB, optical, 2 coaxial, as well as AES and I2S. This unit has balanced XLR and unbalanced RCA analog outputs. There's also a power cord socket and the main power switch. The black aluminum RMT1 remote matches its aesthetics with the same copper-hued buttons. And it does have up and down volume buttons, but they don't function on this model. More on that later. Kitsune Audio offers 3 versions of this DAC. The L1 or Level 1 is $2,200, and it's the base model with standard parts and no remote. The L2 at $2,500 has upgraded capacitors and includes the remote. But this is the special KTE version, or Kitsune Tuned Edition, L3, for $3,100. And it comes with an enhanced special USB module, upgraded transformer, hand-selected DAC resistors, better capacitors, silver wiring in parts, special Holo audio fuse, the remote control, and the nice copper KTE Fox logo emblem on top. I initially replaced the Topping D70S with the Spring 3 in my main system, using the balanced outputs into a Air Acoustics preamp. I used a Bryson amp and Magnepan speakers. The digital inputs were coaxial from a Blue Sound node and Toslink from a Parks Audio Puffin digital preamp. And then later on, I moved it to my desk system where I could more easily compare it with the Topping and another DAC I have in for a review, the SMSL M500 Mark III. The digital source is the usual 2018 Intel Mac Mini running Roon connected to the Singzer SU6 digital bridge device. It takes the digital USB signal from the Mac, it cleans it up, and distributes it as Toslink, coaxial, AES, and I2S, which is very useful in this comparison. I'm running one I2S output to the Topping and the other to the Spring 3, and a coaxial connection to the SMSL DAC. The name NATE 5SI integrated amp does not employ standard XLR inputs, so I must use Blue Jean and Vandenhull RCA cables to connect to each DAC. This makes it super easy to make instant comparisons between the 3 devices by using the input buttons on the front of the NATE. The speakers currently connected are a pair of Lin Catan stand mounts. Listening to my CD collection using Roon, and if you've watched my last video, you will know I'm a recent Roon convert. I was checking out albums like the fantastic John Mellencamp compilation titled Words and Music. And I must say, the songs just jumped out of the speakers. The Holo DAC let dynamic tracks like check it out, and Paper and Fire come to life like I don't recall hearing before. The same kind of thing happened with Sean Colvin's post-divorce album, A Few Small Repairs. The first couple tracks are very compelling and grab your attention before pulling you into a wonderful journey of complex human emotions. Erykah Badu's second album was surprisingly a live album, and it's a terrific atmospheric recording that captures her compelling personality and smooth and sultry voice. Her subtle interactions with the audience are a vital part of the performance, and the Spring 3 DAC lays it all out for you to hear. Madonna's song Vogue is an amazing track to evaluate gear with. Listen out for the electronic bass that comes in around 30 seconds in. Is it a dull, low throb, or does it have a leading edge and some texture in your system? Also, can you distinguish each layered instrument in the dazzling mix? The Holo DAC does a great job with it. And I recently discovered a great band with a bad name, VR Sex, and their recent album, Rough Dimension. I describe them as a dark, post-punk, goth band with heaps of atmosphere and distorted guitars and synthesizers. But the songs are amazingly tuneful with great hooks. Now, listening to this system with the topping DAC, I have to say it's very nice, and I can't really find any fault in it. Everything sounds as it should, has a very clean and neutral tone. No issues there at all. But as I switched it over to the Spring 3 KTE, it confirmed what I believe I heard on my main system. As soon as I switched over the input to the Holo DAC, I was delighted as everything just opened up. The music sounded bigger, more dynamic, deeper bass, wider soundstage, more of a 3D atmosphere. There was more space around the instruments. When I switched it back to the topping, everything shrunk, contracted. It was more two-dimensional. But you know, it's funny. After a few minutes, I got used to the familiar sound of the D7DS, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. I like it. And then I go back to the Spring 3, and I'm like, yeah, that's the ticket. I want this. The SMSL M500 Mark III is a perfectly good component, but it's really not a fair comparison. It has a nice form factor for a desktop system, but in contrast to the topping in Spring 3, its sound was clearly less resolving and three-dimensional. And at $550, it also has a built-in headphone amp, so the ESS-based D-to-A chip would probably go in a $200 to $250 separate DAC. Now, this I found interesting. A common issue with this model is that there's a few seconds of silence while the Spring 3 locks onto a new music track with a different sampling rate. It's remedied by switching off the phase lock loop feature in the settings, or by using a USB input instead of one of the others. Speaking of USB, one of the upgrades to the Level 3 KTE is the enhanced Titanus 2.0 USB circuit. I read that it's actually considered superior to a standard off-the-shelf USB port because it's designed to regenerate its own power and reclock the digital signal. The result is said to be a much cleaner and quieter input. So I plugged the USB cable from the Mac Mini directly into the Spring 3, bypassing the Singzer bridge unit, and guess what? Its performance went up another notch. Everything I said earlier about scale, instrument separation, etc. was enhanced, including a noticeable improvement in dynamics, clarity, and smoothness in the upper frequencies. So I became even more impressed with the Spring 3 KTE. The only quibble I have with this version of the Spring 3 is that I can't control the output volume. It's fixed. The remote and front of the unit have non-functioning volume buttons. So what gives? You have to pay an additional $600 for the installed preamp module. Only then will you be able to remotely control the volume. So therefore, as it stands, the only useful button for me is the input, which I don't use very often. So I would say that for this model, unless you have multiple digital devices connected to the Spring 3, the remote is pretty superfluous. You know, I frequently get annoyed by enthusiasts who proclaim that, along with other nonsense, that as long as they measure well, all DACs sound pretty much the same. And it's a big waste of money spending more than a few $100s on a DAC. Listen, all of these DACs measure very well. I actually went to that ridiculous website and looked at the results, and it was all great. But the difference sound-wise between them is not small or subtle. It is profound to my ears. I didn't need to perform a double-blind test or anything like that. It's crystal clear to me that the Holo Spring 3 KTE is an amazing DAC, and I'm duly impressed. I've not tried the less expensive Level 1 or Level 2 Spring 3 models, so I'm not able to tell you if the KTE version is a great value in comparison. And I don't have other $3,000 DACs to compare it to, so I can't tell you how it stacks up against the competition. But if $3,100 is what you need to spend to get this level of performance and build quality, then I would emphatically say, yes, it's an amazing value. And in my opinion, the parts upgrades and additional tuning that Kitsune performs on the KTE model has paid significant dividends. Now, all I have to do is figure out how the hell I'm going to afford to buy one. In my previous video, I urged viewers to help this channel grow and please consider subscribing. And they responded wonderfully. And I've almost added 1,000 new subscribers. So thank you very much to all who have recently discovered the My Own Devices audio channel. And also, please join me over on Instagram at myown.devices. I'm very active on that platform. Also, joining my Patreon entitles you to get ad-free early new videos for only $3 a month. I'll put some links below. So until next time, peace out.